Well, it's Friday the 13th, so you know what that means. Yeah, that's going to be the trend, essentially. I watch a Friday the 13th movie every Friday the 13th. So, granted, you're not going to get a ton of them all in one year, but I think there's at least two this year. One of them is today. Well, not today, the day that I'm recording it, but today, the day that it's released. So let's pretend that I'm doing this live or on the same day for whatever reason. Okay, anyway. Cut to the chase. If you're new to the channel, what I do is I watch a movie and I sit down and I talk about it, spur of the moment, no script, no notes. Well, notes, but shitty ones. And I do it all in one take, so that's for better or for worse. Just aiming for something completely raw and natural for better or worse. So, good times. If you're new, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. Hopefully I don't disappoint you too much. Anyway, spoiler alert, you know the drill. We'll be talking about the movie, the things that happen in the movie, all that jazz, so... If you don't want it spoiled, if you haven't seen this movie, you can skip ahead to the little section on the timestamp there that says thoughts, or if you want to skip to the rating, you can. But yeah, we're watching the second one. So I did review the first one a while back. Can't remember when exactly. Well, Friday the 13th, whatever the most recent one before today was. So that's when I did it. Anyway, I'm not super well versed in the Friday the 13th franchise. I've seen like Freddy vs. Jason and maybe like one of the later sequels. So these older ones that I'm going in chronological order are all kind of new to me. So that's fun. Kind of discovering what is essentially like one of the OGs of horror, right? So it's kind of exciting. Anyway, needless to say, let's get into it. So, I'll give you a little spoilery synopsis. Click away now. Anyway, so we start off with Alice. Good to see you again, Alice. You had a rough time that first film, but you made it, so that's good. You know, I guess spoilers if you haven't seen the first one, whatever. I'm talking about the second one, so I mean, if a recurring character is there, what can I tell you? Anyway, she's having nightmares, flashbacks about the whole situation that happened in the first movie. I feel like the flashbacks are partially to show how traumatized she is, and partially just to recap the first one in case no one had seen it. Because at the time, Friday the 13th wasn't a franchise. It was kind of like a low-budget horror movie, and this is the second one. So there you go. They're reestablishing that storyline about the mother and all that stuff. So anyway, she snaps out of it. She has a phone call with her mom. She says, no, I'm fine. I'm dealing with it. She's obviously, you know, recovering mentally from all the stuff that she endured, whatever. There's a cat scare, which is great, and then there's like some, you think, oh no, is something gonna get her, and it's a cat, and you're like, oh thank god, and then she gets an ice pick to the head, so boom, she's dead. Alice was done dirty a little bit, but I get the shock value, you know what I mean? It's essentially establishing, okay, nobody's safe. Even your final girl from the first one is, well, now no longer a thing, so right on. Now, I gotta ask, how did Jason get to wherever she was staying? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It matters not at all. Anyway, we have an onslaught of characters in this film. So it's essentially the same idea. It's a camp counseling training crew gathering. So we have an experienced counselor by the name of Paul, who's essentially training all these newer or less experienced counselors for whatever reason. And we're introduced to these two characters named Jeff and Sandra, who arrive at the same town, and that same guy is like, oh, you shouldn't go there, you know, from the first one, the old dude that everyone thinks is crazy or whatever, but turns out to be legit. Well, he's back, and he's whispering doom at them. They go to call their buddy Ted, and they get their truck towed, and it turns out it's a practical joke from Ted, so he's a prankster, I suppose. That's fun. Anyway, regardless, they drive to the lake, and they stop on the side of the road for whatever reason, and then Sandra, I think, finds like an old Camp Crystal Lake sign. She's like, oh, I heard about this place. That's like on the same lake as our camp, right? And they're like, yeah, whatever. Anyway. They don't necessarily go to Camp Crystal Lake, you know, we'll touch on that later, I suppose, but I mean, it's the same lake, so obviously Jason's gonna be lurking around, right? Go figure. Anyway. So they have a meeting, and they're doing all their counselor thing, and our main girl, Jenny, shows up late, and she's in like a Volkswagen Beetle, and she's cheerful, and it's a reveal that, oh, her and the lead counselor are secretly lovers, and all that stuff, and Oh my god. Anyway, that night they have a campfire, and the counselor, Paul, is telling all of the trainees the story of Jason, and like a campfire ghost story, whatever. And tells the back lore about how there was a girl who survived, and Jason saw his mom get her head cut off and all this stuff, and so he lurks the forest, blah 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 blah. Anyway, that is just a precursor for him to say, so there you go, there's the thing, let's not talk about this myth anymore, because it's like I don't even want to hear it. That's all I ever hear about this place. So there it is, you heard the story, get it out of your systems now, that kind of deal. Anyway, all of a sudden, boo, guy with a mask, that's Ted. Practical Joker. What a silly guy. Anyway, they hang out in the cabin, and there's a little puppy that's really cute. It's like a little Shih Tzu thing, like a little bow on its head, and all that fun. Paul sneaks into Ginny's cabin later, and they fraternize, I suppose. And then the old dude, the guy with the warning that was snooping around at the beginning and all throughout the original film, is watching them making out and getting hot and heavy. And then all of a sudden you see a piece of twine or wire or something go around his throat, so he's dead. So there you go. All right, Jason's first kill, I guess, eh? Anyway, he's dead, so that's fun. Yeah, this whole time also I forgot to mention, Sandra is trying to convince Jeff to go to Camp Crystal Lake to explore it, and he's kind of like, I don't know, it's off limits, like condemned or whatever you want to call it. But she wants to go, so I mean, eventually they do go, right? Obviously, but anyway. So yeah, they go for a hike the next day, and there's like a cookout lunch, and one of the counselor girls, Terry, is calling for Muffin, who has wandered off into the bush, and you see Jason's feet and the dog come up, and then you don't see the dog again, so you assume, oh no, that's not fun. Anyway, that's a thing. So Jeff and Sandra go when they go to see Camp Crystal Lake, but they're stopped by a cop who drags them back and gives Paul shit and says, can you control your trainees here, please? That's condemned, you can't go there, it's dangerous. Not because adjacent, but I guess just dilapidated buildings or whatever. Anyway, Paul kind of brushes off the cop, and the cop drives off and sees someone cross the road and runs into the bush and ends up getting the back of a hammer to his head, so Jason kills the cop. You gotta get rid of the cop, right? It's one of those, it's an 80s horror movie. Cops are useless, we all know that. Anyway, so that happens. There's a second kill. Are we gonna get some counselor kills? Yes, we are, as a matter of fact. So anyway, back at camp, there's sorry, I forgot to mention, there's a little shanty shack-like thing that the cop stumbles upon, and when he goes in it and looks at inside of it, that's when he gets hammered. Anyway, whatever. So half the crew is going to go into town and get some drinks. Half of them are going to stay at the cabins and whatnot. So Terry and Sandra and Jeff and Mark, who's a counselor in a wheelchair, which is that's kind of impressive. I mean, hiking trails aren't really usually wheelchair accessible, so good for him. And this girl Vicky, who is kind of into Mark, I guess. So long story short, we'll talk about what happens at the camp first, because it's more interesting. So at the camp, Jeff and Sandra go upstairs to make the love, obviously, and Terry, there's Scott too, he's a jock perv guy. Anyway, Terry decides to strip down naked, because you gotta have naked person in the movies. There's boobs and bums and the other thing and whatever. So she goes for a little naked swim, and she comes out and her clothes are gone, and haha, it's Scott. Oh, hilarious. Anyway, she's chasing him saying, give me back my clothes, you some bitch. And he steps in a rope trap and gets strung up by his legs. So she's like, I could help you down, but I could also just leave you there for being an asshole. He's like, come on, I'm sorry, whatever. She's like, fine. She goes off to go get some something to cut him down or whatever, and while she's doing that, Jason slits his throat. So there you go, first official counselor death. Hooray. Scott's dead. Anyway, that said, Vicky's going to get herself all dolled up because she's into Mark, so she's putting perfume on and whatever. She says, I'll be right back, and she's putting on special panties and stuff, because that's a thing apparently. Maybe it is, I don't know. Anyway, she's getting herself all dolled up in a very 80s way, I guess. And yeah, meanwhile, The other two are upstairs doing their thing, and Mark is kind of downstairs by himself in his chair, and there's a noise. So he goes out onto the porch area and gets a machete to the face, and his wheelchair rolls down the stairs, and so he's out of the picture. That's cool. And Jason grabs a spear that was in this cabin. I don't know why there's a spear, but there is one, and he goes upstairs and he spears the lovemaking couple, which is great. Just, totally destroy their post-coital bliss. Anyways, they're dead. Right through both of them, double spear. Through one back, out the back of the other, through the mattress, you know the deal. Vicky comes back. She also gets deaded. Anyway, what's going on in town when all this is happening? Well, they're drinking at a bar, and they're talking about Jason, and Ginny is really like, is it real? Do you think maybe he's out there still? Like, could there be truth to the story? Whereas Ted and Paul are not buying it for a second. They're like, yeah, I severely doubt that. Fun thing about Paul, this is basically the last we see of him. Doesn't die, he's just not in the rest of the movie. Unless he is and I missed it, like an idiot, which is very possible. Anyway, whatever. Jenny's like, I'm gonna head back, and Paul's like, I'll come with you, and Ted, whether he knows or not that they're, gonna go poonch or whatever. Yes, I use romantic language. He stays behind at the bar, I guess. He's gonna go find somewhere in town, whatever. So they come back, and, they get to the cabin, and no one's around, and they're like, this place is kind of a mess. All the lights are on. What's going on? Like, they wouldn't have just left it like this. So Ginny goes upstairs and she screams, and there's a bloody bed, like the sheets. Shit, yeah, so that's what happened to Vicky. Sorry, so Vicky came back to go find Mark, and when she went upstairs, she found the bed, but instead of the bodies in there, when she pulled the blanket back to expecting to see her two friends, it's Jason with like a sack mask on, and he kills her. Anyway, so that's what happens. Anyway, bodies are gone. She finds the bed. Ginny finds the bed with the blood, everything on it. And she screams, and Paul comes upstairs, like, what the hell's going on here? Anyway, what happens after that? Oh yeah, basically there's, she finds the bed, and then, boom, there's Jason in the thing, and him and Paul are scrapping, and Ginny kind of goes into another room behind the door, and she's looking like, oh my god. And Jason gets up, and Paul is not, so we assume, oh no. Anyway. So there's a little bit of a chase scene. She hides herself in a room. He comes through the window on the outside. She goes into like another room and all this shit. Basically, she runs out into the forest. She goes to her car right away, which is smart. But her car's a piece of shit in this movie. It's established as early on. So obviously it doesn't start. I guess this is where that trope comes from, right? I don't know if this is like one of the first ones to do it, but you see that in so many movies now, car not starting. Anyway, regardless, car doesn't start. Runs off into the bush again. As Jason's approaching, she like nut shots him, which is kind of hilarious. Buys her some more time. She goes to hide in a cabin, and he'd already put like a pitchfork through the roof of her car, so when she ran out or whatever, that's the nut shot, all that stuff. So he's got a pitchfork, which is phenomenal. She runs into a cabin, hides under a bed, and then Jason enters, and there's a mouse, and she's like holding her breath, and then you see. There's a scene that I don't really like. Did she piss herself? So the mouse shows up. She's like, oh my god. And then you see the end of the bed and like a yellow liquid pooling from under the bed. So did she piss herself? I guess so. That's a choice. So anyway, that Jason obviously saw that, because when she comes out of the bed, there he is. Woo! That's good times. Anyway, he attacks her immediately with a pitchfork, but the chair he's standing on breaks and he falls on his ass. So he's really new at killing people, you know what I mean? Sackhead Jason and hockey mask Jason are not one and the same, clearly. So this is definitely a dude, like just a guy. Because she's able to like push him and stuff and like not overpower him, but like knock him down. And she goes at him with like a chainsaw and cuts his arm slightly and then hits him with a chair, and then he stops moving. And I mean, you had a chainsaw, why would you switch to a chair? I guess she doesn't want to kill someone maybe, but I don't know. I would have, no, I wouldn't have. Who am I kidding? I'm not going to chainsaw someone. So fair enough, whatever. She goes back in the forest, and she finds the shanty, and Jason follows her, and she locks herself in this room and turns and sees the bodies of all of her counselor friends, and Mrs. Voorhees' severed head, like partially mummified on a table with candles around it, like an altar or something. And her sweater on the ground, and so she quickly, as Jason is breaking down the door, she puts on Mrs. Voorhees' blue knit sweater, and Jason breaks the door down, and I guess he's kind of like, oh my god, what? Like, he's confused for a second, and so Jenny, very clever on her behalf, starts acting like she's his mom. Jason, you're such a good boy. Your work here is done. I'm very proud of you. And then she's like, now kneel down. And she has a machete ready. And Jason is right now kind of like, this is my mom, right? Oh, I'm going to sneeze. Am I? Nope. Stop. No sneeze. Okay, good. So yeah, where was I? Right, it's the final scene, and Jason kneels down, and as she raises the machete, Jason sees his mom's head, and he's like, you're not my mom. Anyway, enter Paul, who is alive, and tackles him, and they scrap, which is great. Ginny ended up getting like her leg sliced too, by the way. I forgot to mention that, so she's injured, but Paul and him are scrapping. She grabs the machete and right through the back, through like the shoulder collarbone thing, so that's like major arteries. Jason slumps down. That's the end of that. Great. The two run out. She hobbles. He carries her. They're in the cabin. They're, oh yeah, they unmask him too, and they don't show the face right away, but they're like, Jesus. So they're back at the cabin, and she's on the bed, and they hear a noise, and they both get their weapons ready, and I'm thinking, oh, that must be Ted, right? Like, he's probably back from, his night out in the town. They open the door, and it's the little dog. It's Muffin. Yay. So Muffin's back. Who gives a fuck about Ted, I guess, right? I don't know. He probably hooked up or something and stayed in the city. Lucky him. Anyway. Dog's alive. That's cool. And then, of course, we cut to the same trope that was in the original movie, where instead of coming out of the water, though, of course, he comes through the window and pulls her out the window, and then the credits don't roll, but we have the paramedics loading her onto an ambulance, and her saying, where's Paul? Where's Paul? And that's it. And then we zoom in on Mrs. Voorhees' mummified severed head. So that's the film. What did I think of the second installment? Well, it was better than the first one. I don't know if it was better, but it was more competent, seemingly, or more professional, or I don't know. It was a much more slasher-y slasher than the first one. We have an established villain. We have... Jenny was an okay character, most of the counselors were kind of like tropes for a little bit, like not so bad that it's like, this is the jock, this is the slut. Like, it's a little bit better than that, but they're still pretty generic. But Jenny was okay. Paul was alright too. They're both just like people. No super defining traits on them, but they were, I cared if they lived a little bit, so that was nice. The flow was a little bit more, let's get things rolling right away than the first film. Again, I realize they're completely different movies. Like, I'm comparing them because they're in the same franchise, not because they're the same kind of film. So, the first one you want to watch with kind of like a... I mean, because it's, it's a classic, but you can pretend like who done it, you know what I mean? Trying to figure out who the killer is, even though we all know who it was. If you don't, I won't spoil that, but anyway. This one, we know who the killer is right away. It's already pretty much established. Like, yeah, Jason is around. That's not a spoiler because it's established like right in the beginning of the film. Anyway, but yeah, overall, I did enjoy it more than the first one. It was a more entertaining watch. Whether it was a better movie or not, I guess, is up for debate, but I enjoyed it more than the first one. Not like a ton more, but a significant enough more. This is really pointless. I'm not explaining anything properly, but let's go through the basics. So acting, it's an 80s slasher movie. They're fine for what it is. Like I said, they're not overly ridiculously characterized, but they're still characters. Like, they're, they have their tropes. Interesting choice to put like a wheelchair dude. That was, very I don't know, inclusive, I guess, for like 1981. Was this? Is this 81? I don't remember. Anyway, so that was interesting. What else? They had the nudity, which you have to have in a slasher movie, especially in the 80s, which, great. The fact that they didn't put it in the exact same location as the first one, and it was like Crystal Lake adjacent, that was all right. I like that. That was kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much bad to say about it. Like, it's dated, clearly, but not in a way that makes it, a pain to watch. Like, I had fun. I'll be real, the first one, when I watched it, I was kind of like, yeah, I probably won't watch this again. But this one, I could see myself throwing on again in like a year or something. I don't know. Why not? It wasn't that bad. It was entertaining. They had a couple scenes from like the killer's point of view, which is kind of cool. Like what they did in Black Christmas. I don't know if it got that idea from that or if this was already an established thing that they did in movies to make it like kind of creepy, change the perspective. But I liked that. That was good. The dog was fun, I guess. I don't know. The legacy character at the start, again, I made my opinions about that clear at the beginning of the spoiler part, so I'm not going to spoil it, but anyway, that was a thing. Overall, yeah, it's fun. I'll watch it again, probably. I don't see why not. I'm kind of excited to see what the next couple of films are like, because like I said, I've only seen, Freddy vs. Jason and then like one of the later sequels. Like, I think it was Jason Goes to Hell that I saw. I don't really remember, but yeah, being new to this franchise and it being such a staple, I'm excited to see where this goes, legitimately. Most people who enjoy horror movies have seen all of these, and me, I'm just a dumb idiot kid who's never seen them, so that's kind of fun. Anyway, that being said, let's get to the point, because I'm just rambling. What am I going to rate this guy? I'm going to give it a solid 6 out of 10, and I feel that that's justified, because like I did enjoy it. It wasn't like... For the time, it was probably innovative, but like compared to today's standards, I've seen so many other movies that go the slasher route that it wasn't like groundbreaking for me, but it was still enjoyable. So it gets a 6, which is not a bad ranking if you ask me. Yeah, next Friday the 13th, I guess we'll see what part 3 has in store. As for tomorrow, it's Valentine's Day tomorrow, so I got a little episode ready for tomorrow too. Yes, we're going 2 back-to-back days. Lucky you, or unlucky, one or the other. But there you go. So don't forget to dislike and unsubscribe, and we'll call it a day. All right, take her easy.